Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for part 9 of a 32-ish part series. As we journey by journey through, as we journey chapter by chapter through Fairy Tale by Stephen King, a book that is so blandly titled that I have to keep checking it just to make sure I'm not doing it wrong. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to start with comments from the last video. Then we're going to go into a So What Happened section of the video where we sort of recap what this chapter was about. Then a lit crit portion where I have I want to read a little bit from Joseph Campbell here. Just an opening paragraph to one of the chapters. And then a writer's notes portion. Now, to begin the comments section of this video. I posted this video last week. I post this right before I go to bed. And I woke up to a handful of just absolutely lovely comments. And I absolutely lovely comments. I'm not saying that facetiously. I'm not saying that sarcastically. I mean lovely comments. And I thought to myself, this is weird. Look, I have to admit, maybe it's not an admission, maybe I'm just so guilt-prone from talking about books online. I think that possibly, with the exception of politics, nothing else opens you up to as nasty of comments online as talking about books. Why? Well, so I could give you some doozies. I've been doing this since late 2015. I have had some absolute doozies come through. And I think part of it is that readers internalize the books that they read. Everything on those pages ends up as a reflection of themselves. So when they enjoy something and see it as a reflection of the self, as inevitably we do, and you come across some schlub on the internet telling you that book is garbage, you're going to take it personally. So when I saw all of these wonderful comments, I wondered, what is going on? And I realized that I sort of prompted that by saying it felt like I was shouting into the void sometimes, which it does. Of course it does, right? If I put a video up on something that no one has read, no one's going to watch that. And I promise, guys, you do not have to do a wellness check. I half expected KCPD doing a wellness check, but we'll address those comments now. Adam says there are better books from King to do a chapter-by-chapter read-along for. Now, besides The Shining, which has a series already on the channel, and besides it, for which I have something special that I want to do. I've wanted to do it for years now. It's going to be a whole lot of work, so maybe I won't get around to it. But besides those two books, I'm not challenging you, but tell me which ones. Tell me which ones from Stephen King that would be profitable for a chapter-by-chapter read-along. I have some knowledge of King. I've read a few of his books, as well as reading Danse Macabre and On Writing, which are sort of meta books in the Stephen King canon, I guess. I don't know if you would refer to those as canon as they are nonfiction. That's weird. I've never thought about that. Is canon everything that a writer writes, or is it just what is within a specific genre that someone writes? Is it just you often hear that non-finished works fall outside of the canon, etc. Anyway, let me know which Stephen King books or books in general that you think would be profitable for a chapter-by-chapter read-along. Then we get to Ken, who says he's enjoying the series and mentions some of the breakdown that I go through in a video-by-video basis. Ken, anyone, what are some things that you would add I just came up with these things as I was reading. In fact, I wasn't even going to do the writer's portion of these videos until I noticed some things in that first chapter that were interesting, I thought, to comment on, and it wouldn't make sense really to comment on them in the Lit Crit portion of a video. This is the first series I've ever done a comments section on the read-along for, because this is the first real thing that I've ever done sort of live like this. I picked this book up the day that you could pick it up and started reading it that day, posted chapter 1 the following day. So that is what prompted me to add the comment reaction section, which, by the way, keeps me from getting ahead on the series, right? So what other sections would be profitable, perhaps? One of the things I was going to do for the It series, I'm not going to put everything out there that I'm going to put in the Black Label series, but one of the things was character development. The thing that keeps me from doing that here is that I haven't already read this book. If you think that even on a live read-along that would still be profitable, let me know. But it's possible that you're wrong more often than right when you were talking about character development on something during a first read-through. So if there are other sections, other things that you thought that you think would go well into a series like this, let me know. Mike says he's enjoying the writing breakdowns, and the question that I have from that is, are there other novels or short stories that you think, because Mike says he's not even reading the book along with this, he's reading Pet Sematary. Are there other books that would lend themselves to a writing assessment during their reading? I was not particularly aware or ready for this book to provide so many talking points from the writer's dilemma, if you will. The Hemingway is confounding. So one of my favorite writers, especially on a craft basis, is Hemingway, but everything in Hemingway is so clean that rarely does it prompt writing level discussion besides to say, hey, you see how he did this? Don't you wish you had thought of that? Right? At least I think that's right. So you're here, and I think that's right. So you must think that's right, right? DM Tree says that DM Tree is watching. So don't feel like I'm shouting into the void. What about the abyss? What about the great without? And if the great without is without, isn't it within? Because it's with all. I don't know what I'm talking about. Let's get into the So What Happened portion of the video. Charlie is taking Radar out when she goes absolutely wild. Something is banging on the shed doors, and it's crying in a loud pitch, crying type of whine. Bowditch yells at the both of them, Radar and Charlie, to get back inside. In fact, get all the way in the kitchen. Shut the door. Don't come out after me. Then he goes and retrieves his pistols. Pew, 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 pew. Then sorry, I zoned out for a moment. He goes outside himself and disappears into the shed, where he sinks 2 slugs. He puts 2 plugs into something that Charlie sees whisk by the door in the darkness, but that's all that he sees of it. Charlie helps him after the shooting back inside, and Bowditch needs to lay down, needs a couple oxy, and needs a little bit of whiskey. Because of the events that just occurred, Charlie is more than willing to give him those things. And then a couple days go by, and Charlie promises to be quiet. And later, things seem to be getting better, both with Bowditch and Radar. Both seem to be in slightly better health than they had been. Always a bad sign. Bowditch calls Charlie in the middle of the school day and says, "Hey, I'm having a heart attack." Charlie says, "Did you call 911?" He says, "Hey, I called you, bud. There's a wallet under the bed. You're going to need that. Here's the lawyer you're going to need to call. You're going to need to call him. And what else was it? It was a wallet and a lawyer. Maybe that was it. Oh, right, the decision. You're going to have a decision to make on Radar fairly soon." After this, Charlie hangs up and calls 911 himself. Bowditch died on the way to the hospital. The lawyer that is called asks to talk to Charlie in person. Everybody saw where this was going. Charlie, Dad, Radar, the therapist, the neighbor, and the lawyer are the only beings at the Bowditch funeral. Turns out everything, capital everything, is left to Charlie so long as nothing comes up in probate. Charlie returns to the house to retrieve some things that he had left there while taking care of Bowditch. Only someone or something has broken into the house. Now, let's get into the Lit Crit discussion portion of this video. So one of the things that Mike had said as well is that he had never heard the differentiation between genre and literary fiction put quite how I put it. And I have to admit, I don't think I got that from anywhere. It might be that I completely made it up. That is one, it's the way that I have observed things, and it might be that that is not even a particularly informed opinion, but I defy you to test it. That said, one of the other differences between genre fiction and literary fiction oftentimes is where these writers choose to spend time. In the wake, not at the wake, in the wake of the Bowditch passing, there's not much time for revelation there. If you were to read, say, James Joyce, that might be a moment where, honestly, so there's two ways to do it, right? Some literary fiction writers would allow for that reflection in that moment. Others would carry on with the story and have a breakdown later. There's something that happens in this chapter that doesn't let me know, but allows me to sort of entertain the idea that that breakdown won't be coming for Charlie. Oftentimes in literary fiction, here's one of the ways that I try to define literary fiction and ask what I'm writing and how. Literary fiction describes the big through the small or the small through the big. The ontogeny, recapitulating phylogeny type of thing here. So describing the big through the small. To go back to Joyce, you have these warring factions in Ireland. You have a religious divide, Protestant, Catholic. That struggle will be relayed through individuals. That is the big through the small. The small through the big is sometimes more difficult to really put your finger on. But the small through the big, to me, is if you have, for example, and I can't think of any texts in which this happens, but I'm sure there's something glaringly obvious. People, no matter who we are, no matter where we are, and no matter when we are, have the same emotions. We got the same engine between our ears. This is, for example, if we're going back to a warring idea, a warring faction, warring factions, these little nuances of our characters can be expressed through the actions of large groups. Okay, for example, where is it? We Have Always Lived in the Castle. There is a moment when town folk show up at the house for no reason, and all of them are very, very angry. This happens because in that story, at that time, the individuals involved are feeling, one of the individuals involved is feeling some form of guilt and anxiety. That guilt and anxiety manifested in a large group of people coming to the house and throwing rocks and all of these things. This is the small through the large. Sometimes these things happen at times in the story where it doesn't make sense, because there is a large segment of our day-to-day life that is on autopilot. There is a large segment of our entire world that's just on autopilot. There's a Peter Gabriel song where I'm pretty sure it's written about the Kennedy assassination, where he says, I will wake up your empty shells. And what he's talking about is assassinating someone as they're on live TV. I will wake up your empty shells. A large portion of our day were empty shells. So, for example, the Bowditch call that comes to Charlie, you would be numb at that time. In Harry Potter, we're going to have spoilers. I believe it's when Diddledore dies. Harry Potter goes back to school and can't believe that people are carrying on with their lives. It's a disconnect. His empty shell has been shocked awake. Stephen King, at the moment of Bowditch's death, doesn't really spend any reflection there. Another way that this happens in literary versus genre, fairy tale is a genre piece, for lack of a better term, but at least so far, it is very rooted in reality. Without seeing further into the story, and this is one of the problems with doing a live read-along, without seeing further into the story, the fact that this is called fairy tale, and there is this mysterious sort of foreboding nature to the shed, and we don't know where Bowditch was getting the gold, but we have the allusion to Jack in the Beanstalk. We have all of these allusions. We have to imagine that the shed presents some portal to a different world, to an alternate world, to an underworld. The interesting thing is, with genre fiction, the further from basic life we get, the more space there often is for literary type reflections. Lord of the Rings, for example. A lot of reflections on death and things in there. Here in this story, so rooted in the real world as it is, no real reflections yet. I'm willing to bet if there is some portal to an underworld or an outer world or Planet X, whatever it is, there will be friends of Bowditch, because mysteriously he has none in this world, that take the time to reflect on his death. Yeah, I think that's all I'm saying there. But because I'm a weird guy, I don't know if you put that together yet. We're 9 episodes in. This makes me think. This makes me reflect. This makes me remember. There's an older fella where I work, and he's at the age where things are winding down, probably. I mean, just by sheer math. And is making me reflect, on myself. Just seeing him, right? And this scene reminded me of a documentary that I watched. After doing a little bit of research, I think it was called A Certain Kind of Death. And this was a documentary that I watched, obviously illegally, on YouTube, uploaded in several parts. Must have been over a decade ago, because I remember where I was living when I was watching it. And it was a documentary about basically what happens when someone dies and there's no next of kin. For example, someone lives alone in an apartment, dies. Well, maybe work calls them, but work's not going to know to call the police. Maybe Henry no call, no showed because he got another job. Decided screw all these people. So, but eventually, there's the smell, right? And it's just sort of, it's a documentary. Again, I think it's called A Certain Kind of Death. I don't know if that's the one that I saw, but a documentary on what happens to you, if that's you, what happens to your stuff, if you have stuff. It is the most unique, sad that you might ever be. So I challenge you, if that's the right documentary, to seek that out. In the Bowditch wallet, did you notice it? There were 5 silver certificates. We've talked about precious metals in this series before. Silver certificate. Do you know what that is? A silver certificate was a bill pre-19... That might have been before 64. That might have been 50s and before. All of your currency had printed on it, this is a silver certificate, this is a gold certificate, certifiable by the United States government for this dollar amount in the precious metal. Can't do it anymore. Probably don't have the gold. Probably don't have the silver. Just a fiat currency. It was interesting. So that is not planned. That is not unplanned. That is there because Stephen King knew the silver certificate was important to have. 151. Mike, you should read along, I think. I think you should get a copy of this maybe when it goes paperback. It's not a bad read, you know. It's a little bit boring, especially we're here 160-ish pages in, but 151. He bent and stroked Radar. She looked up at him briefly. This is really true, Dad asked. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. I lied to myself in my own notes. I was only trying to get my head around the fact that I now owned, or soon would, the top of Sycamore Street Hill. And why? Just because I'd heard Radar howling in the backyard of what kids called the Psycho House one chilly April afternoon. No, you do not own all this stuff because you heard radar howling one chilly afternoon. You own all this stuff because you answered the call. But because this answer was so unabated, because this answering the call was so immediate, I'm assuming, because I've already gone into answering the call in this series a little bit, so I'm going to assume at some point later in the story there will be some refusal of the call. What is the refusal of the call? This comes to us from The Hero with 1,000 Faces in a chapter titled Refusal of the Call. How unexpected. Often in actual life, and not infrequently in myths and popular tales, we encounter the dull case of the call unanswered, for it is always possible to turn the ear to other interests. Refusal of the summons converts the adventure into its negative. Walled in boredom, hard work, or, quote, culture, end quote, the subject loses the power of significant affirmation action and becomes a victim to be saved. His flowering world becomes a wasteland of dry stones, and his life feels meaningless, even though, like King Minos, he may, through titanic effort, succeed in building an empire of renown. Whatever house he builds, it will be a house of death, a labyrinth of cyclopean walls to hide him from his minotaur. All he can do is create new problems for himself and await the gradual approach of his disintegration. Possible that is Charlie, but probable that is on some level what we're seeing from Bowditch. That Bowditch has refused the call at some point. Now, the last talking point that I have for the Lit Crit portion of this video, 152. Following the funeral, when we got home, following the funeral, where Charlie is told he owns everything. When we got home, Dad brought 2 Cokes from the fridge. We clinked cans. How do you feel, Charlie? I don't know. I can't get my mind around it. Do you think he has anything in the bank? Or did the hospital stay clean him out? That's the first conversation you're having? There's no sadness here. There's no real reflection at the funeral. There's no real sadness at the funeral. And I know, through great pains, Stephen King painted Bowditch as a recluse, as a pain in the ass, as a nasty old fella, as a cursing old man, all these things. Stephen King painstakingly painted that picture time and time and time and time again of Bowditch. Still, Charlie spent all that time with him, and now they're cheering each other after the funeral? This is a great place for a writer to put some twisted melancholy, some sour joy, some combination of emotions that are high and low and leave the narrator in the middle. Stasis. This would be a great place for something like that to happen, but it doesn't. It doesn't happen. Not here. And if this was not King, if this was not Stephen King, if this were a writer who had written, say, less than 150,000 books, like Stephen King has written 153,000 books, different books. If this were a different writer, I would attribute this to bad writing. at the very least, I would attribute this as a lost opportunity. With Stephen King, I'm willing to say I don't know what he's going for, but I'm assuming there is some different angle somewhere that will be picked up on. But I don't know. This strikes me as very strange. There's no real reflection. There's action on Charlie's behalf the minute he gets the 911 call. Or the minute he gets the call from Bowditch. He makes the 911 call. He races out of school. He tries to get to the Bowditch estate. Then he receives the phone call that Bowditch has died. We don't really pause. We don't really reflect. We don't really have any sadness. We don't really have any reflection on the relationship with Bowditch. Not just Bowditch, but the relationship with Bowditch. We don't have a reflection on anything that Bowditch has said to him or tried to teach him. It's a weird turn there to me. Now on to the writer's notes. I have a pair of notes here that I will present together. I have noted several times in this series already that there are questionable sort of uses of dialogue. Now, Stephen King is approximately 97 years old. I think that's about right. He's writing a character 80 years his junior. It's not going to be perfect. But that said, there's been some egregious things that have been said that you're like, look, and here's the challenge we have. I'll present the challenge afterwards. 137, I usually rode my bike up the hill around. I'm doing it time and again today. I usually rode my bike up the hill around 6:45. I haven't heard anyone under 60 years of age today use the phrase quarter of. Just haven't heard it. You sound like someone's grandparent saying quarter of. Now, we pair this with 152. The lawyer has just told Charlie and Charlie's father that Charlie owns everything. Charlie's father replies, "Holy fuck." Is that something someone's dad says? Is that something so that today someone in their 50s-ish would say? Look, here's the problem. Everyone that age that I know said, "Holy shit," right? It wasn't really until my generation that I think we really started playing around with the holies, right? Here's the issue. And I think it's a big one in today's readership world. Every character gets to be that character. Is it inauthentic for someone in their 50s to say "holy fuck"? Is it inauthentic for someone in their late teens to say 7:15? Kind of, but not really. It might be that these people say those things. Every character gets to be that character, but that character has to be consistent. Maybe it is. Maybe these characters are consistent. Maybe it's me who's out of the loop. Maybe 17-year-olds around the country are saying 3:15 right now. I don't know. 3:15, 3:45. I doubt it. But it does not wholly take me out of the text until everyone is using phrases anachronistic to their ages. Now, one of the big things that we're getting time and again in today's world, that you see time and again online, people criticizing texts, is that a character is written inauthentically. What does that mean? That means the character that you chose in this age bracket of this income level that belongs to said race, and all of those things check the same box as me. I don't talk that way, so I don't think this character would. Where's the line for this? Where's the line for this? Where's the line for simply posing? In Adjustment Day by Chuck Palahniuk, there's a black character who says mama. Okay. My first roommate was black when I moved out of my parents' house, and he made fun of me because I called my mom, not mama. So it's authentic, right? Okay, it's a thing. But it felt so weird coming from Chuck Palahniuk. Is that allowed to feel weird coming from Chuck Palahniuk because I know what Chuck Palahniuk looks like? Was it my reading that made it seem weird coming from Chuck Palahniuk because I know what Chuck Palahniuk looks like? Or is it in this text weird because I know Stephen King is 113 years old? So when he has a 17-year-old saying quarter of, it seems inauthentic to me. Where are these lines in writing? Where are these lines for an author? Where is this line in communicating? Like I was saying, every character gets to be themselves. That themself, that, quote, themself, end quote, has to be consistent. On 141, all alcohol smells the same to me, of sadness and loss. Fade to black. Charles Unchained. A student film. You're better than that, Stephen. You're better than that. If you read On Writing, if this phrase might turn up in the next edition of On Writing, where you're making fun of people using saccharine quotes. Last note that I have here, on page 151. So the only reason I'm saying this is because this is something that I would offer in a writer's circle, in one of these master's classes that I wasted so much money on. We have this little bit of dialogue here between Dad and the lawyer as it is being expressed that Charlie now owns everything. "This is really true?" Dad asked. "Lawyers never lie," Braddock said, then rethought what he'd said. "At least, they don't in matters such as this." You just made it wordy. You can add more words and make it less wordy and keep a sense of humor in it. If you say something like this, "This is really true?" Dad asked. "Lawyers never lie." Well, not with a last will and testimony. Well, not this time. That is more words and less clunky. Again, what is in the book, "This is really true?" "Lawyers never lie," Braddock said, then rethought what he'd said. "At least they don't in matters such as this." Versus, "This is really true?" Dad said. "Lawyers never lie." Well, not with the last will and testimony. Well, not this time, right? You're getting all the things that you had put in there. You're getting it strictly with dialogue without having to give us the "he reconsidered." And you're getting this, I think, to my reading, the same type of humor and laugh that you would have been going for with that other phrase. But you're showing us the character doing it, not telling us the character reconsidered. That is all I have for this video. I hope to have you back Wednesday for Chapter 10? Chapter 10 of Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Let me know in the comments section what you want to see or hear from this series. If you were here by chance but not designed, consider hitting that subscribe button to make sure that YouTube continues to suggest these videos to you in the future. And if you like this sort of thing, it really does help me out in the YouTube algorithm if you decide to hit that like button.